So all the lines connecting to each other are how they talk to each other, and that's through the notification and observer events that Pure MVC itself kicks off. And so everything in there, the mediators, the proxies, the commands, and the facade, they all can send notifications. Now, mediators, commands, and the facade can also listen to notifications. This is how we're going to tie everything together. The only thing that can't listen to a notification is a proxy. We really don't want the proxy to be tied to something. We just want it to be a data object, really. And we don't want it to tie it to a mediator or tie it to a command specifically because we just want to pull that information, that data back out of the proxy. So it doesn't listen for any notifications, but you'll see a lot of, in our code, a lot of notifications coming from the proxy because we've hit the Ribbit request, we've got an incoming call, and the proxy is listening for that, and then that needs to send a notification off to our mediator to let our UI know that an incoming call is coming in. So you'll see a lot of notifications coming from the proxies. So just a really quick Pure MVC process. First you have your facade that's going to basically generate your command files and start sending notifications off to itself just to start up the different commands. So it's going to kick off a command, send a notification to that to really start executing some code. And this is how we're doing the process with our components here. Now, inside the command is where we actually register these mediators and register the proxies. So for the login example, which we'll go through here in a second, we have a login facade. Actually, the facade that we're going to have is a component facade. Most of the times when you import in Pure MVC, you want to create an application facade. Here, we couldn't really do that because we don't want to tie the end user down. If they want to use Pure MVC also for their application, we didn't want to create an application facade so that they could do it, and then our components would actually just be a component facade. So we can just import those in. They'd be separated from your main application framework if you decide to use Pure MVC. So with that commands, you're basically going to register your mediator proxies, which are going to be login mediator, login proxy. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at the login components. So here we basically have the COM folder that you saw earlier. And so we have a root level tag here, basically COM, Ribbit, components, Flex. If we, when we release the Flash ones, they'll be under there too, but probably won't distribute them at the same point, but it'll be the same path, com.ribbit.components. Inside here, we actually have, inside the Flex, we have all of our components broken out into different folders here. So login has its own login, it has its own model view controller here. Dial pad, exactly the same thing. Contacts, you have your model view controller there. One thing we did need to create was a connection to the Ribbit service. So we have a services file. I'll just open that up really quick. And all this is really doing is just setting up a Ribbit request. We're just getting that Ribbit request, just like we had created with the code samples before, where we created that Ribbit request object and gave it an ID of request. This is doing exactly the same thing here. There's going to be some account requests and some setting stuff that's going to be extended into the new 2.5 API here. So basically, we can see here when we actually imported in the login component to our application when we built it, it gave it a namespace of NS1, and you can find out here exactly where it goes. Oops, sorry. It's really this com.ribbit.components.flex.login folder. And that basically pulls in the whole component right there, puts it right onto your stage, and you're all good to go. So now with the login, what it's really pulling back is this login mxml file. That's our component that's really there. As you can see, the parameters that we were going to set, basically either the application ID or the dev ID here, they're inspectable properties. That's what actually puts them over into the category view, and you can change the properties there. And you can see here, here's where we actually instantiate basically the component facade itself. And we'll get into the component facade in just a second. But from startup, when this component gets moved to the stage, it's going to pull in this component facade by importing it in here. It's going to take that facade and go ahead and get an instance of it and start using it. Then once this MXML file is actually created and we set the creation complete on the actual just canvas tag here, we're going to call the facade and we're going to tell it to do a startup, which is going to go out and turn on commands, and then the command's going to go out and turn on the mediators and proxies. So that's all this MXML is going to do. That's it. It doesn't need to know anything else about what is going on. The other thing it's doing is bringing in the actual view component itself, which is the username, password, login button, log out button, user status, and then the remember me function. We do have a little bit of just kind of checking the login. This could be moved over to the controller if you wanted to, but right now we just kind of left it in here for just kind of ease. But really what this does is this now dispatches events.